Good afternoon. Welcome back into another edition of the PowerMizzou.com podcast here on YouTube or wherever you may be listening later. Gabe DeArmond, publisher of Power Mizzou here. This is the Yuengling opponent preview show. We'll get to this weekend's opponent, the Alabama Crimson Tide, here momentarily. Want to remind you guys, if you're at home watching on TV in the Show Me State Yuengling, available all across the state of Missouri. Pick some up. One way or another, you're probably going to want some after this game is over. I do understand it is also available in Alabama. If you're traveling to Tuscaloosa, we encourage you always to log her up and obviously do so responsibly outside Bryant-Denny Stadium. A good tailgating scene. It's been a few years since I've been down there, but good game day atmosphere and all that. We welcome in Mike Rodak from Bama 247 to talk about the Crimson Tide this weekend. Mike, what's going on, man?
Not too much. Yeah, there's definitely Yuengling in Alabama. I can confirm that.
This is excellent news. We are slowly converting most of our subscribers into big fans. And look, one way or another, one team's fan base is going to want plenty of it after the game because I look at this as an elimination game. The loser of this game can't talk about the college football playoff realistically anymore. You agree with that?
100%. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the spot where Alabama's at, the rest of the season with 2 losses. Even with 2 losses, I think their path is not completely set in stone. I think there are scenarios where they could finish, run the table, finish with 2 losses and still be out of the playoff. I think, it's a very good chance that they would be in. But if you have 3 losses, you're pretty much at 0. So, yeah, definitely true for Alabama. I would imagine it's probably true for Missouri just because their schedule's not as tough as Alabama's.
Right. They need this win to be able to maybe at 10-2 kind of have something to show the committee, or to theoretically, even though it seems a little unrealistic at this point, get to 11-1. At which case, I think any SEC team is in. Just big picture. How are Alabama fans handling this? Because I know most places you're 5-2, you're ranked 15th in the country. You feel pretty good about it. I know Alabama fans over the last 15 years, there's only one thing that makes the season worthwhile. And that looks, while still possible, a little bit more difficult than normal.
Yeah. Not handling it well, I would say, is probably the general overarching theme. I mean, it's been a pretty horrific month of October here, as bad as it's been in quite some time. Probably close to 20 years. So, you had the loss to Vandy, you had the South Carolina game, which was a win, but it felt like a loss walking out of that building with the way they played and the way they almost gave that game away at the end. And then you lose to Tennessee, which honestly, of those 3 games, they probably played the best overall. It's probably the game that would probably fell most in line with expectations entering this year. Of all of Alabama's games so far this year, saying that they lost on the road by 1 touchdown to Tennessee would have been, I could have seen that. Nobody saw the Vandy loss coming. So it's a little bit different. There's a slightly different feeling. But at the same time, as much as the Vandy loss was embarrassing, I think for fans, losing to Tennessee, losing to a very bitter rival, historic rival going back, more than 100 years, that also has a different kind of sting to it. And doing it twice now in 3 years, the last 2 trips up to Knoxville, they've lost. That's been rough for Alabama fans. And, there's been certainly a lot of questions about Kalen DeBoer, a lot of questions about how kind of the program is being run, a lot of different little things that come out that people are comparing to how Nick Saban did things, which I think was inevitable at some point, with the caveat that there was issues towards the end of the Nick Saban era too. I mean, this is a team, like I said, just lost to Tennessee 2 years ago. They haven't won a national championship since 2020. I know that sounds crazy to say
horror,
but there was a little bit of a slide, 2021, 2022, 2023, for Alabama. Even getting that team to the Rose Bowl last year was a pretty big accomplishment. So I think it's a little bit unfair to kind of pin it all on this is happening with Kalen DeBoer because of his coaching style. This is all his fault. That's not right. But fans are certainly looking at every little thing that he says, every little thing that they see come out. And there is a lot of heat on him right now, which is, again, crazy to think that going out of the month of September, they had just beaten Georgia and they were the number 1 team in the country. And how quickly things have changed around here is pretty shocking.
Well, you can't do ridiculous things like wear T-shirts on the sideline in Tuscaloosa. I get that. But look, this may be a stupid question, but how's DeBoer handling it? Because always from outside, the viewpoint as soon as Saban announced his retirement was, I don't think you could pay me enough money to take that job and be the guy. Like, you never want to be the guy that follows the guy, even though, like, most reasonable people still understand, hey, Kalen DeBoer's like in the upper echelon of coaches in this country.
Yeah, I mean, that was always the story about him coming in, was like he runs into fire. Like, he's perfectly fine with going into a situation like this. He has a lot of self-confidence, but it was always kind of this story about him being humble but confident and having this very kind of even-keeled personality. And that was really true throughout the entire offseason, throughout the first month of the season, even through the Vandy game, through the South Carolina game, where he's very kind of unflappable. He doesn't change very much, very even keeled. And, I think that probably is a good quality to have when you're coming into a job like this and you're coming into a lot of pressure, but you can start to feel him feeling it, if that makes sense. Like I can feel a little bit of the pressure that he's under. And, I think he's very aware of kind of what he says now and how it's being perceived. After the Vandy loss, he said, I was proud of our guys, and, the ball didn't bounce our way sometimes, and we just need to execute better. And that really got fans mad, because it's like, we're Alabama. We should just walk in and beat Vandy just by default because we're more talented than them. None of this ball bouncing the wrong way stuff. And you can tell like he's kind of listening to his inner thoughts a little bit more when he talks, and is trying to avoid kind of saying some of those things. And you could sense a little bit more frustration out of him, after the Tennessee game, in terms of, the game it was undisciplined. They had a lot of penalties. It's not acceptable. Like you could feel it a little bit more. So, this is all kind of new to him. He's, spent a lot of his coaching career early on in Sioux Falls as a head coach there, NAIA level. And he's been at some smaller programs, and very recently has become a Power 4 head coach. I mean, it's only the last 3 seasons now, when you go back to the 2 seasons of Washington and here. So his experience kind of dealing with the Paul Feinbaums of the world, and now, honestly, it's a lot of former Alabama players who work in the media. Not necessarily, it's not consistent here and there in terms of, what they're saying, but you have Greg McElroy out there, you have AJ McCarron who does some stuff, you have Damian Harris, Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry was just on Mark Ingram's podcast. They're all talking about Alabama every single day. And it's a lot of it's like how it used to be under Nick Saban and how it is now. And a lot of people are kind of making that contrast. And you have Nick Saban himself, who's going on TV every single week now, talking about your team and saying that he thought the team was arrogant coming out of the Georgia game, going into the Vandy game. So you have a lot of that. That doesn't exist at Sioux Falls, I don't think. They're not talking about you in College game day. So he probably just needs to block out a lot of that stuff, because I think he's just programmed to kind of listen to what's going on and read a lot of stories. But I think at this moment, he probably just needs to lock in with tunnel vision. And I think even Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator, said it this week. Like, anything that they're thinking about that's not about Missouri this week is a detriment to them.
So on the field, if you can pick out what it is, like, why is this Alabama team maybe, again, they don't have problems, but maybe more beatable than the last few editions have been?
Yeah, I mean, it's still kind of being debated because they are number one. You go into 24/7 Sports' talent composite, they're still number one in terms of talent. This still is not the most talented Alabama team that I've covered. This is my 6th year. I don't think it's as talented as some of those Saban teams, certainly. It's harder to be that talented with the portal now. It's harder to stockpile players at certain positions. So they're definitely thinner, but they still have a lot of high-level talent. Ryan Williams could easily be one of the best receivers in the country with the next year or two. I think he's going to be there. Jalen Milroe is a very talented quarterback. He has a lot of arm talent, a lot of leg talent. Their offensive line has multiple 5 stars. I mean, their running back, the room is good. Like, their defense has some talented players on it. LT Overton was the number 1 prospect in the country at one point. The transfer from Texas A&M, Damani Jackson, was a top 10 prospect at one point. I mean, the talent's there. is it as deep and as kind of like proven as some of those Saban teams? No. So it's trying to kind of balance. Are they deficient in talent? Sort of. Are they just doing things? Are they not living up to their talent? Are they not playing up to their standard? Yes. Like it's a combination of both. So you eliminate some of the bad penalties that they've had, and they're one of the most penalized teams in the country. Just some of these dumb mistakes like Milroe has made lately, like illegal forward pass penalty on third down that negates a third down completion against Vanderbilt, has the intentional grounding in the end zone against South Carolina, has thrown 4 picks over the last 2 weeks. Like, you stop doing some of that stuff, I think you probably play to your level of talent a little bit more. But at the same time, they did lose some players coming out of the Saban retirement and even before the Saban retirement. And they're probably not the most talented team in the country, even though we have them as number one in the talent composite.
So look, the offense, you mentioned Williams, Milroe, all those guys, like they're still capable of going nuts and putting up plenty of points. Where this doesn't look like Alabama is on the other side of the ball. I mean, Vandy comes in and frankly just kind of runs the ball down their throat. And then they've also at the same time given up some pretty big pass plays. I mean, where has this defense been the most vulnerable, and where is there, hope that, okay, this is all fixable and we'll get this going in the second half of the season?
I mean, it's been both ends, like you said. I mean, the run defense has not been great. I think it's below 50th now in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like you said, Vandy ran right through them. South Carolina had some moments. Tennessee ran for 214 yards. I think 170 of those came in the second half. Dylan Sampson was really getting going. So the run defense, the front seven, I think it's kind of flip-flop. But the front seven is less talented but more experienced. The secondary has very little experience, but they're more talented. There's some 5-star corners that are out there as freshmen. So it's kind of a different story depending on what you're looking at, but both ends of the defense have had trouble. The big loss for Alabama this week in the secondary is Keon Sabb, the starting safety. He went down with a foot injury, kind of played through it during the Tennessee game, but they've pretty much shut him down. The transfer from Michigan is a really mature player, a leader on the team, and a good player too. So to lose him is going to be tough for them the rest of the year. And, their corner group especially is pretty young and inexperienced. So, it's been the pass defense at some points. It's been the run defense. I don't know if it's fixable. It's just, you kind of have what you have out there. Like, I don't think you're going to, get better, especially without Sabb. So it kind of is what it is. I think there's a lot of pressure and a lot of heat these last 5 games on Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator, to kind of show what he's got, because there's a lot of fans that want him gone. And that's how it works at Alabama.
Right. One of the most interesting things about this game to me is obviously Kane was the head coach. Corey Batoon was the defensive coordinator at South Alabama. Now he's at Mizzou. DeBoer, before he went to Washington, was the OC at Fresno State, where Kirby Moore was his quarterback's coach. Now Missouri's OC. I asked Eli Drinkwitz about that earlier this week and kind of how that, impacts this game. And he said, honestly, the best scout team look we can get during the week is to go ones-on-ones, because there's a lot of similarities in the system. And I said, okay, will you do that? And he said, I would do that if we were healthy, but we're not. So no. Have you guys talked to either the coordinator, either DeBoer or Womack about that?
Not really. To be honest, there's just been so many other kind of little things that it's kind of like the Vandy week for a different reason. Like coming out of the Vandy week, we're all still asking about the Georgia game. Talk about Ryan Williams' great catches in the Georgia game. And in fact, I think the wide receivers coach, Demarcus Shepard, got mad at us at one point. Said, we need to focus on Vandy. Like, you guys are asking questions about Georgia. And I think it's kind of the same thing this week. We're all kind of asking questions about the Tennessee game, for the loss and all the little things that happened in that game that are annoying fans. And to be honest, there's been very, very few questions asked of players or coaches this week of Missouri. I don't know if that translates to behind the scenes, them, not focusing on Missouri. That's not what I'm saying, but from our standpoint, like, I will say our coverage is certainly geared more towards the Tennessee loss, just because I don't think Alabama fans are taking Missouri seriously themselves, especially, with the potential for Brady Cook not to be playing.
Yeah. So this question may also kind of be like, yeah, nobody's worried about it because nobody's thinking about it. But we don't know at this point if Brady Cook is playing. We don't know at this point if leading rusher Nate Noel is playing. I mean, I'll be honest. If Missouri goes down there without Brady Cook, they don't have much of a shot to win this game based on what I saw last weekend. I mean, is there, what's kind of the thought from the Bama side about, are they going to get Brady Cook, and can Brady Cook actually be functional on an ankle that looked pretty bad?
Yeah, I mean, DeBoer did his radio show last night and was talking about Cook as if he would play. Obviously, you kind of have to as a head coach. You don't
Right.
want to sit there and say, "Yeah, we don't think he's going to play. We're not going to worry about him."
Yeah, Eli Drinkwitz learned that lesson about 3 weeks ago. He talked all about Marcel Reed, and then Connor Wigman came in and absolutely carved him up.
Yeah, I would imagine, Kane Womack is probably focusing more on Drew Pine than he is on Brady Cook, but you still have to prepare for Cook. So, I mean, I think Luther Burden, to be honest, is probably the player that kind of scares them regardless of the quarterback, just because he's probably the best receiver, just pure talent wise, that they have seen all year and then probably will see all year. So that, with the young secondary, with a starting safety being out for the year, with a secondary, like you said, has given up some big plays, as long as the quarterback can get the ball up in the air and get it to his direction, like, there can be some problems, regardless of the quarterback. And we've seen that it's kind of been teased all year in the secondary. Like, even Byron Brown, the quarterback for South Florida, had a couple deep balls against Alabama that the receivers were open. They beat the corner. He just missed the throw. And I think the same thing happened in Tennessee. Like, Nico missed a couple deep balls that were there. Alabama was beat on those plays. So, again, regardless of the quarterback, if he can get the ball there somehow, and you have a guy in Burden who probably can, beat some of these players in the secondary, then there could be problems. And, I talked to Mo Linguist, the defensive backs coach, yesterday, and he thinks Luther Burden's a first round talent. So even if the production maybe is not there so far this year, I think they have a lot of respect for him.
Spend a few more minutes with Mike Rodak from Bama 247. And I'm curious, a lot of Missouri fans have noticed, like, hey, tickets are getting way cheaper for this thing. You mentioned, like, what's the atmosphere going to be like for this game? Is it kind of like, well, yeah, there's a game, but where are Bama fans at?
I think they want something just to celebrate right now. I think they want to feel good. It's homecoming. They want things to feel normal again. And for them, that means you go into Bryant-Denny Stadium and you watch the Alabama win by 30, and you go home and you drink and you party. Like, that's just what do you do at Alabama. I don't think they want to walk in and watch another South Carolina game or watch another South Florida game. Those have been two of the games they've had. Another one was the Georgia game where it looked like they were just going to have a big party. They're up 28-0. And then all of a sudden you're down 34-31 or whatever it was at one point in the fourth quarter. And you kind of have to sweat out those last couple moments. So just a normal Alabama game, them winning comfortably by multiple touchdowns, is, I think, what fans want. And if that doesn't start to happen, if you get into the second quarter and they're losing, or it's tied, or there's turnovers and more penalties, like, it's going to be tense. Will they boo? Like, there was a couple boos coming out that South Carolina game. You might hear a little bit more if that stuff starts to happen in this game too. So it's tense, but I think you give them a reason to celebrate. Jalen Milroe connects on a big deep ball or something. Like, I think they will gladly take that right now.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, Bama's got a lot of guys with plenty of experience, so you wouldn't think that attitude would bleed over too much. But what kind of reaction do you expect from the team if, let's say, Missouri hits something big early and, they have a 10-3 lead in the second quarter? Is this a game where, hey, the longer you let them hang around, you might find yourself in a bad spot?
Yeah, I think there's probably a legitimate fear of that. And kind of the idea of players letting those external factors, those thoughts creep into their head that if we let Mizzou hang around, then we are looking like the team that everybody thinks we are. And that confidence level probably goes down. I think it probably starts with Jalen Milroe, because he's had a notable regression the last couple of weeks. And that, again, if he starts going out there and missing some more throws an interception again, and he doesn't look like the quarterback that he looked like in September, does he get in his own head about that? So that's that's something that I think is legitimate. I think it's something to watch. And this team, like I said, has been under a lot of fire for not having, apparently the perception from fans is like they're not as mentally tough. They're not as disciplined. They're not playing the traditional Alabama football. And you get into that situation and maybe that will show.
So, you mentioned what if we're the team they think we are, right? I've said that about Missouri all year. Like Missouri fans, the team thinks they're better than what they've shown. But at some point, we're in week 8 of the season. You kind of are what you are. The tough part about that with Bama is, yeah, you've got the South Florida game, you've got South Carolina, you've got Vandy. But we've also seen the ceiling, and the ceiling was good enough to be blowing out Georgia through 3 quarters. So which team is this?
Yeah, and they went to Wisconsin a week earlier too and beat Wisconsin pretty badly too. Granted, Wisconsin lost their starting quarterback early in that game too. So I think people are kind of thinking what they saw in the first quarter of the Georgia game was probably a little bit of a mirage, that maybe Georgia didn't have a whole lot of film on Kalen DeBoer's offense at Alabama, Kane Womack's defense, and once Kirby and his staff, which is probably the best in the country, kind of got their handle on it. They figured him out in the second half. I think that's kind of the increasingly prevailing thought, if you will, from that game. And I think fans are starting to view this team as maybe not what they look like against Wisconsin or against Georgia in the first half, and more like what we've seen the last 3.5 weeks. And they kind of had these issues last year. People might remember they lost to Texas at home last year. They had the South Florida game on the road last year. That was a debacle for most of it, and that team kind of pulled it together. They even had some tough games in October, but by the end they blew right through LSU, and then they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. And they had that whole Lank mentality, let the naysayers know. And I think that's still kind of around. I mean, Jalen Miller, I think, still uses that. But again, if you are playing the way you are still, then maybe the naysayers were right, and maybe you weren't letting them know.
Right. All right. So last thing, and look, I know how this goes. Like, you do 18 shows and you can make 18 different predictions and just say you were right. So I never ask people, make a prediction if you want, but more like for the Missouri fans that are watching and listening here, if there's a path to Missouri walking out of Tuscaloosa with a win on Saturday, what is it?
I think you got to hit a couple of those deep balls that have been there against this Alabama defense, and you potentially have to do it with the backup quarterback, which is not easy. I think that's it. And I think, I don't think Missouri's pass rush or defensive line is what we saw to Tennessee and South Carolina the last couple of weeks. Right. So, but if you're able to get pressure on Jalen Miller, I think teams have figured out ways to kind of keep him in the pocket, keep him contained as a runner, but also get him disrupted as a passer. We've seen a lot more of that on film the past month, especially. And if you can do that with the personnel that you have, which, again, may not be top of the SEC level talent, then I think you'd be in a good shape. But my prediction for the game, I think, was like 35-13 Alabama. I still think at the end of the day, it's a game that they need to win. It's a game where they've kind of got slapped in the face right now, and I think they've been woken up a little bit. And I think we'll see a better Alabama team.
All right, Mike, appreciate your time, man. Look forward to Saturday.
You got it. See you then.
All right, that is Mike Rodak, Bama247.com. Check out all their coverage again on the 24/7 Sports Network. You can read every message board. Can't post over there, can't go over there and rile the people up, but you can read their stuff. So appreciate Mike joining us. Let him go. And a couple questions from the chat that I'll go ahead and address real quick for you guys. Mattress Market's asking, what are the chances Mizzou starts Cook this week? I mean, I can't throw a percentage on it, but look, guys, this is what I'll say. I know that the news was out there yesterday from Pete Thamel that, it's doubtful, not looking good, all that. I get that. And it's possible he doesn't start. For Brady Cook to not start this game, I think there's only one way that happens. He is told by the coaches, we cannot allow you to play. I think that's the only situation. Like, they are going to have to physically go take his helmet and say, we can't let you do this. It's not smart of you to be on the field. Because being truthful, what we saw against Auburn last week, Drew Pine was 0 for 5 on passes more than 10 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. They don't trust him they weren't running the offense. The entire goal after Brady Cook went down was don't drive this thing into the ditch, and let's see if we can find a way to win 10-6. And you're not winning 10-6 in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. It's just not going to happen. I think Brady Cook will absolutely make every effort he can to be on the field. And I think, like, if I had to guess, I think he'll start the game. Now, will he finish the game? Will he be effective? Those are much bigger questions. But I just can't see a kid who literally limped out of the hospital to play last week not being on the field for the first snap of this game. Sean's asking if Noel or Cook is more likely. So I know, again, yesterday there was a report out there that Nate Noel was not playing in this game. I immediately checked with the source, who would certainly be in a position to know, and was told no decision's been made. He'll be listed as doubtful on the injury report Wednesday night. He was. Gerard Hamilton posted some information on our message board today. We feel a little more optimistic that Nate Noel might go this weekend than we would have yesterday. I still don't know. We don't know that that's going to happen. But as of today, I would term both of them as, hey, they're going to give it a shot. If the game was now, it's not now. It's 51 hours from now, and we'll see what happens between now and then. My guess is they will both be listed as doubtful tonight on the injury report. They may still be listed as doubtful Friday night. And then on Saturday, an hour and a half before game time, when it has to be updated for the final time, I think both will be listed as questionable. And then, how do you feel in warmups? Can you move? Does whatever we do medically help? And we'll see where it goes from there. I would say, if I had to guess, I think Brady Cook starts. I think Nate Noel maybe is available but doesn't start. That's where I would go on Saturday. But again, these are guesses, guys. Nobody knows this information for sure. I'm not sure Eli Drinkwitz, Brady Cook, and Nate Noel know this information at this point in time. But did want to update you there. I mean, the availability report came out last night. Like, basically every guy's questionable in the starting lineup. Mookie Cooper, I think, was doubtful. I've got some doubts whether that means a whole lot or whether we're kind of playing some games here. I don't know that. I certainly haven't been told that, but just looking at that injury report, I thought that's a lot of dudes. I think most of them will play. So we'll see what happens. Appreciate you guys hanging out here with us on Thursday, almost afternoon. We're very close to noon. So once again, if you're here on the live show, like, comment, subscribe, all that. Thanks to Mike Rodak for joining us. If you're listening on the podcast, then share it on social media. David Carnell says, I bet Noel is a no-go. Very, very well, maybe. Very well, maybe. If you're listening on the podcast, share it on social media, say some good things, all that. Sorry, got caught up reading the chat there for a minute. And regardless of where you're watching the game on Saturday, or even if you're at the game, pick yourself up some Yuengling, whether it's the nice green bottle, the can, the flight, whatever you get. Get yourself a beverage. Enjoy Mizzou, Alabama at 2:30 on Saturday afternoon. We're going to have a post-game show afterwards. All our pregame and post-game shows this year brought to you by Yuengling, America's oldest brewery. You can check them out at yuengling.com as long as you are 21 years or older. As always, we ask you to enjoy those products responsibly, but definitely enjoy them. So everybody, thanks for hanging out. This has been another episode of the Yuengling Opponent Preview Show here on the PowerMizzou.com YouTube channel and podcast. And we will be back later in the week after the game on Saturday.